there are toxic people out there. It's not everybody. I don't mean to make you paranoid. Maybe there's like 5% of the world that's truly toxic. Every single human being, I can guarantee you, has had to deal with these toxic people in a way that's painful. And you don't see them, they're very tricky. These are people who've learned to disguise themselves. You're going to get sucked into all these dramas and traumas with these people. It can make your life miserable. Imagine that you had a realistic attitude and you could see through these people. You could catch, before you get involved with them, signs of that they might be one of these types.
What can you tell about a person by looking at their face? Can you tell that someone's a narcissist just by looking at them?
That's a great question. And I've known many narcissists in my life. We all do, so I'm not special that way. And I noticed over the years that there is a kind of a facial quality to narcissists. It's hard to verbalize because it's more for me a feeling, but their eyes are kind of a giveaway. So narcissists often give the impression that they're interested in you. They like you. They're listening to you, which you think is kind of a contradiction. It doesn't sound like a narcissist. But it's not the kind of attention where they're really interested in you. They're trying to get something from you. They're trying to get you to like them so that they can now use you, right? So the way I say it is there's a kind of a deadness in their eyes. They're looking at you, they're listening to you, but you can see they're not really connecting. The wheels are spinning inside their brain about what they can do with the information you're giving them. You can recognize that it's not lighting up. There's not a feeling of warmth or interest in their eyes, right? There's also a kind of, I'm thinking of the people that I've known in my life and certain facial qualities. And there's this kind of smile that is slightly demonic where, I can't really describe it, which is why I say some of it's hard to verbalize, but it doesn't feel like it's directed towards other people. So oftentimes when you smile and you laugh, it's a social thing, right? You're responding to other people. You can't really control it. Somebody tells a joke or you hear something and you're laughing and there's kind of a communion going on between you. But the narcissist, there's something, they're just stuck inside themselves. There's kind of a demonic quality to when they laugh and to when they smile. I know I'm not being brilliant at describing it. If I see it, I know it right away.
It's almost like that smile comes from judgment rather than like appreciation of what the other person is saying.
The way to see through that tactic is this attempt at friendship genuine or not? And that's a tricky question, right? But that opens up the whole thing about being much more sensitive to the nonverbal cues that you pick up from the person. Because what often happens with women is that they sense something is wrong with the man from the first time they meet him. But then they drop the suspicion very quickly. They think, oh, he's not so bad, or I had it all wrong. But actually that first instinct was very right. So you have to trust your instincts, and you have to trust that this person that is trying to become your friend, they're giving off signs that there's something kind of cold about it. It doesn't feel genuine, right? It feels like a tactic. And we can get into that later because
I would love to, actually, if you don't mind just giving us a few now.
So one thing that a man will do if he's using this kind of tactic is he's in a bit of a hurry, right? Because, Jesus Christ, I don't have 6 months to become friends with this woman. I want to sleep with her tomorrow, right? So he's in a bit of a hurry. So his effort to be a friend is kind of rushed. He really likes you, right? But he's texting you, he's talking about you, asking you questions and all these other things. But it's all it seems kind of rushed. In a period of like a week or so, he's suddenly your friend now. That is a sure sign that something else is going on. Because if you genuinely want to be a friend of someone, you're willing to take your time, right? So the calculating seducer is probably after sex fairly quickly, right? Or an abusive relationship.
And I've got a quote,
Yeah.
Even the strongest can be made vulnerable if you isolate them from their nests and safety nets.
Okay. So this is a manipulative tactic. There's no doubt about it. People have their own kind of context, their family, their friends, their workplace. And sometimes if you can isolate them from that context, they become much more vulnerable to you, right? They don't have any friends. They don't have any support anymore. So they only can rely on you. And it's something that is done over time, right? So if you're confronting with a male seducer who is trying to turn you off from your friends, who is making it so that your best friend, oh, I don't think you should trust her. I think she's up to something, right? He's trying to do things like that. He's trying to alienate you from your family. I think your parents were really awful to you, etc., is a very classic technique, because in your sense of isolation, you're much more vulnerable to getting support from this particular person. And so one of the tactics that I talk about in the book is taking the person to another country or to another place where they, even on a holiday or a vacation, where they feel unsupported, where they feel a little bit alone and isolated for several weeks, kind of break down that element and make them want to turn to you for trust and support. So if you feel that a man is trying to isolate you in the subtlest ways from your friends, from your family, from the place where you live, and is criticizing that and trying to make you feel like, maybe I don't like these things. Maybe that friend isn't really somebody I can trust. This is somebody you should be very, very suspicious of. It's a terrible tactic. It's trying to isolate you socially from the things that support you. And you should be very, very suspicious, and you should not give in to that.
Mm-hmm. One of my favorite analogies is, have you ever seen like water that drips on a rock? And if it goes over and over years and years, the rock ends up changing its shape. Yeah. I think of narcissistic tactics as that analogy, because as you were describing it, imagine you have the person that's subtly giving you these negative comments about your family, subtly giving you these negative comments about your friends. Over time, you end up starting to question it. You start to look at something you never would have looked for. Yeah. And before you know it, that slow dripping effect that your toxic partner has had on you has eventually changed the way that you see the world and the way you see people around you.
Right.
I was pushed around a lot because I was sort of a naive writer type who didn't understand that there are bad people out there. So one of the things I had to learn in life, and that are the source for my work, is that there are bad people out there, and you have to recognize that there are narcissists, that there are aggressive people, that there are passive aggressive people, that they are enviers. And you have to be aware of that, and you have to be strong enough to deal with them. And by not being able to deal with those kind of people, your life can be completely ruined. One awful toxic person, one bad relationship can ruin you for life. You internalize the negative energy. So the ability to stand up for yourself and to be aware and to understand that not everyone has the best intentions, that you're going to be more strategic and not always kind of just accepting what people give you, was a major source of wisdom for me. And all of my books come from a bit of anger, and I think the reader can feel the anger in them.
When you first meet somebody, it's a very strange thing. Because when you meet people for the second or the third time, it's not the same, right? But when you see them the first time, there's a weird energy going on because they're a stranger. And strangers, there's something there's a wariness about them. There's a curiosity. It's a different energy than anything else. And you're feeling something from that person that's different from after you've seen them 2 or 3 times, because after 2 or 3 times, you're not paying attention. You've assumed, oh, this is what they're like. I know who they are. That first time, you don't know that. And those gut feelings are much stronger. You're picking up vibes about them. Something is a little bit off about this person, right? Something about that narcissist, those eyes I was talking about. You pick that up, whereas the 3rd or 4th time, you're not sensitive to it anymore. So yes, you've gone wrong. You weren't paying attention earlier on. Now you're involved with someone who's up to no good.
So let's say, for instance, you had a mother who was very narcissistic, who really wasn't giving you the normal mother, nurturing, empathetic energy. It was more about her, and you had to pay attention to her, right? Well, that kind of
creates this sort of desire. You're as an infant, you really want that love from that mother. You're trying to drag, you're trying to attract and pull it out of her as best you can. And your energy, your desire is surrounding her with this kind of emotional charged sexual energy. And you're going to find throughout your life, you're going to be attracted to narcissistic women. It's going to be your Achilles heel throughout your life, because you want to kind of heal that wound. You want to be able to play back that initial trauma and sort of rewrite the way it ended up, where now you're going to find this narcissistic woman and she's going to give you finally what you never had before, right? It's a very, very common pattern, right? And so you're not even aware of this. And it's extremely difficult to break out of, because your desire is for this type of person. So you might meet a woman, just doing it from a man's point of view, who isn't narcissistic, who's very empathetic and very caring. And she would be perfect for you. And you may even have a relationship with her. But the excitement, the energy, that charge isn't going to be as strong as with that other type. And you're going to fall back into the old patterns again and again and again. And the only way out of it is to go back and look at your early childhood and look at these wounds and confront them face to face and understand that you're a prisoner of this kind of things that were ingrained in you at a very, very early age.
I mean, some people are toxic. I talk a lot of them about toxic characters. People, those are the kinds of people who can't really change. Their patterns are too ingrained. And we've all met people like that. We've all had to deal with a narcissist who's so deeply self-absorbed. There's nothing that's ever going to save them or pull them out of that self-absorption.
Unless they have like a near-death experience, or they have someone close to them.
That's
like,
true.
You know, something where it's a big awakening.
That's true.
Or they get sick or whatever, right?
You're right. That happens. That does happen.
Sometimes.
Sometimes it does. But you have to be honest that there are people out there. You can't be naive. There are people out there who are toxic, who are dangerous, who can ruin your life. You hire the wrong person. And I've dealt with in my consulting with a lot of people who hired a business partner who ended up sort of taking the business from them. Very common scenario. You have to not be naive and recognize these toxic types. And often it's best not to try and change them, because trying to change them entangles you in a lot of their drama.
And it's just never going to happen. You might be trying for years and wasting your time and energy.
But, you know, people have to be able to to change themselves.
A strong character is a person who can take criticism, right? Who can work with other people, right? Who can deal with stressful situations, who can handle responsibility. And if there's something goes wrong, they take, I am to blame for it. They don't look at other people. There's somebody you can rely on. You lean on them, and there's something there to lean on. You can rely on them in situations. A weak character is somebody who cannot take criticism. And that is probably the number one characteristic, the worst trait, I think, in people, and a definite trait of negativity, is somebody who can't take any kind of criticism, right? They're so defensive. So that means they can get away with anything. They can say anything they want, and there's just like a wall, a shell around them, right? So the ability in a work situation, in a relationship, to take criticism and be able to use it constructively is an incredibly useful and powerful trait to me that reveals strong character. How people handle stress is a really good sign of their character. So in a work situation, people are good at faking it and pretending that they're very strong. But when it gets really stressful and there's a lot of pressure on it, the mask falls off and they reveal that they can't handle it. They're too weak. They're reacting to everything. They can't get out of the moment. They're so impatient, and fragile. And so the ability to handle stress shows that somebody has something strong inside of them, right? Mm-hmm. How they handle power, right? So when people are kind of climbing up the ladder in a group or in a job, they generally try and pretend like they're with the group. But once they have power, that all falls off, and they can become abusive, and they feel like they can get away with things that they couldn't get away with before. They treat people below them miserably, etc. So when people have power, how do they handle it? Are they responsible? Do they suddenly become somebody different, or do they maintain the character that they had beforehand? Right? What kind of partners do they choose? Do they choose a spouse, a husband, a girlfriend, etc.? Somebody that they can push around, somebody that's inferior to them so that they can feel better about themselves? How do they look when they're playing like a game or they're in outdoor activities or something that has nothing to do with work? Are they so competitive they have to win at everything, even when it's like outside of that kind of environment, you know? These are kind of traits that help me sort of judge a person's character.
Yeah, and these are often the things that we either ignore or we actually let them kind of fall by the wayside or don't pay enough attention to them because we think, oh no, but they're so smart and they're so this. And I wonder how much of that is also like, what does that say about us that we often get attracted to the wrong things within people? What does that say about us? Does that make us a strong or weak character?
I know that I tend to get involved with narcissistic people. It's a weakness of mine, right? And maybe it's because of my upbringing, and maybe it's because I feel a kind of emptiness inside of me, and that their charm and the attention that they pretend to give you is kind of enchanting or casts a spell on you and it draws you in. Yeah, so if you're dealing with your own weaknesses and your own emptiness inside, you're going to be drawn to people who fill that up. Or you're going to be drawn to causes and charismatic leaders that pretend to give you a purpose in your life because you don't have a purpose, but they have it for you, kind of thing. So a lot of it has to do, with ourselves, and we're attracted we're even attracted to negative people. And there are people who have patterns in their life where they deliberately choose the worst kind of person for them, right? And over and over and over again, because at least that makes them feel alive. At least the pain of it, gives them a sense of something dramatic. And so they deliberately bring on that kind of pain. So it's complicated. Yeah.
When you said that often we feel an emptiness inside, and you were saying maybe because of your upbringing, you felt that emptiness inside as well. Have you tried to fill that emptiness, or is there another solution?
Well, to me, it's why I wrote the book Mastery. The way I fill my emptiness and how I've done it since I was a kid is through my work and through my ideas and my thinking and how I'm constantly looking for new thoughts and new ways of looking at the world. So I find that if I didn't have my work as kind of, some people think of work as something that you just have to do, right? It's just a way to get money. But for me, it's a way to feel like I'm a human being, that I am who I am. I was destined to write these books, and it gives me every day I wake up and I know this is what I need to accomplish, et cetera, et cetera. And so that's why I read so many books. That's why I'm so intrigued by ideas. That's why I'm writing a book right now about a subject that very much captivates me, because it does feel that inner kind of emptiness. But on the other hand, as someone who meditates and practices a form of Zen meditation, there is a purpose to emptiness, right? It's not necessarily good to be always having to fill things up in your brain, like you're just pouring food into your system. There is something actually kind of intrinsically beautiful about the idea that there is emptiness, that I don't really have a self, that there is no such thing as a mind. Actually, it's an illusion that we create, right? It's something through words that we have. So that sense of emptiness, that I don't have an ego, or that I'm confronting the world and I'm just hearing and seeing things as they are, is actually a beautiful thing. So I have to kind of struggle against this idea of always having to fill myself up.
What's something you were saying you like observing humans and humanity? What's something that you've observed about humans over time that surprised you?
Well, nothing really surprises me because I read a lot of history and I see that things just keep repeating over and over and over again. I know, though, since I had my stroke and since I'm physically weak and there are things I can't do anymore, I've actually noticed that people respond to me differently, and it's actually very positive. So sometimes I can be very negative about people. That's kind of my inclination. That's how my mind tends to work, which is not necessarily a good thing. We all have these attitudes that make us look at the world a certain way. I tend to have a negative bent towards human nature. But I must say, people have been very, very kind to me since I've had my stroke. And it's sad that you have to have an accident like that to be able to perceive it. But I've seen another side where everyone wants to help me. They kind of empathize with the fact that I'm a little bit helpless in these situations. And it's also made me kind of feel differently about other people who have disabilities or things that they can't help in their lives. But the sense of I'm a little bit helpless and people are really eager to try and help me actually is something that has kind of surprised me in a way.
Yeah, I liked what you said there, that it's sad that someone has to go through something for us to then show that sides of ourselves, which means that it's always there. It means that it exists inherently within us.
Yeah.
Do you think it's because why do you think that is? Why do you think that is, that if it's inherently there, we don't display it at all times to all people?
I don't know. I mean, we're all born with the capacity for empathy. It's something that interests me a lot because the feeling that I'm connecting very deeply to another person, let's say my wife, etc., is a very overpowering emotion. It gets me out of myself and I'm seeing the world through her eyes, as opposed to me always projecting myself onto her. It's a very moving experience. And sometimes you go to a movie and you find yourself getting inside the characters, you're getting outside of yourself, and you're feeling this empathy for them, you're identifying with them. These are all very powerful emotions, right? And we all have the capacity for that. But the world we live in is actually a machinery to deaden those emotions, that sense of empathy, right? It just puts so much emphasis on ourselves, on our individuality, on who we are, our needs, the attention that we want, that we deserve. We're so focused on ourselves that natural feeling of wanting to get inside of another person. And it's very strange, Jay, because if you think about it, our inner lives are actually quite boring. The same thoughts repeat over and over and over again, the same emotions, the same preoccupations, the same anxieties. And other people, they're so different. They have their own worlds, right? It's like traveling to another country. So we should actually be much more oriented towards other people. We should have a natural interest in their world because it takes us out of ourselves. It's like therapy. But it's been deadened by so many things in our world, by social media, by the pressures we're under, by just modern lifestyle. And so that empathetic muscle that everybody has is kind of atrophying. And yet there'll be moments where it kind of sparks to life and you feel like, God, I want that. I want more of that in my life, more of that in my world. How do I get it?
What would you say is your most repeated thought on a daily basis?
Like, what do I need to do today? What's on my schedule? So like I'm meditating in the morning and I'm trying to empty my mind and I'm going into what's known as a koan, right? And then these thoughts keep bubbling up and they're so annoying and it makes you aware of of the machinery of your own mind. And so to answer your question, it's always like, oh, did you remember that you have to call this person this afternoon? Did you remember that you have to change that reservation? Do you remember that you have to do this, that, the other? Scheduling things. So unimportant, so trivial, where I'm trying to open my mind up to something vast and important. It's little things like scheduling and stuff like that. Then there'll be other thoughts that will be repeating, like if I saw a movie from it, images will keep popping up from that and such. It makes you aware that you're not in control of your own mind, right?
how have you found over time with meditation and other practices? What have you used in order to start quietening, emptying, whatever the right word is for you, releasing those thoughts so that you can connect with the vastness, be creative or self-express?
Wow, it's not easy, and it's an ongoing process. And I could say I'm maybe 10% of the way where I'd like to be. But first of all, you recognize, you go through a thing where a thought pops up, and it's like, why am I thinking about that? I don't like it. You realize that it's just a thought. And what is a thought? Now, I know we're getting really weird and metaphysical here.
I like it.
But it's not real. It's a phantom, right? It has no reality. Reality is your body, the present moment, the birds outside, the sky, where you are sitting, the fact that you're alive, that your blood is pumping. These are real. But that thought in your mind is a shadow. It's a phantom. It doesn't exist. It has no reality. And so I go through this process where don't engage with it. And it's really weird because then my mind plays tricks on me and it pulls up a thought that's definitely going to engage me, right? Because it wants that. It's like a sugar rush. And so I go, okay, no, I'm not going to engage with it. And it made me realize as I went through that process that this is what social media is based on. Social media has mirrored the human brain on a large scale. We have thoughts that are designed to grab our emotions and make us think about them repetitively over and over again, compulsively, right? And there's probably a purpose behind that. But social media is actually a genius at that, at putting up things up there. They're going to engage our emotions, so we have to pay attention. So I always try and, every time that happens, I withdraw and I say, it's just a thought. It's not real. It's not who I am. This is a very important part of meditation. Your thoughts are not who you are. They're a separate part of yourself. You are something different from your own thoughts. I don't know if that means anything to you.
It does, definitely. And while we are not our thoughts and we are not our mind, our thoughts become our reality. Yeah. We find that a repetitive thought turns into a habit, that turns into a pattern, that turns into an action, becomes our reality. For example, I am a unorganized, lazy individual. Usually translates into, oh, I forgot to send that. It didn't happen, because now it's a belief that's built up. And so it's so fascinating that something that's so not real becomes so real. And I've been really into seeing how thought editing is so useful as an activity and an exercise, because I've found so many of my thoughts become my beliefs that become my life. And I think a lot of people don't realize, because they don't realize that their thoughts are like clothes that you can change. We do believe that our thoughts are real and our reality,
right?
And whatever we're hearing in our head is exactly what is,
right?
And we don't realize that, oh, it's like looking in your wardrobe and saying, I don't like the color green anymore. I'm going to change it for blue.
Right.
It's as simple as that.
Well, there was something I read recently in one of the Buddhist books that I like to read that said our minds are basically topsy-turvy. They're upside down. So the reality is we don't I mean, I don't want to get too deep into this, but we don't really have a self. The self is a construction of our minds. There actually is nothing there. And that kind of emptiness, that egolessness, is enlightenment. It's a beautiful feeling. And maybe in your life, you've touched upon it briefly. I know I've touched upon it briefly. It's not the reality I have every day, but that's real. And what's not real are the thoughts, but everything is turned upside down in our worlds. And so these delusionary thoughts about people, about who I am, about my habits, etc., they become our reality when it's exactly the opposite. Right? You have to be able to be aware of that. And so, meditation is all about becoming aware of these things, because we walk around like automatons. I'm very into this writer named Gurdjieff. I don't know if you've ever heard of Gurdjieff. No, I haven't. He was he's basically from Armenia. He was in the beginning of the 20th century. He was this man who was very interested in mysticism, and he traveled throughout Asia trying to find
the essence of all the different esoteric philosophies, and he created his own philosophy. And it's very interesting, very exciting stuff. He wrote a book called In Search of the Miraculous that I highly recommend people. And it's not woo-woo stuff. He was a very, very practical man. He puts it in very practical terms. But his idea is that we walk around asleep. We're on automatic pilot constantly. We're not really aware that we're breathing, that we're existing. We're not aware where our thoughts come from. We're not aware of how our body moves, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And so it's a process of slowly becoming aware of these kinds of things that is really kind of, I've been doing this 14, 15 years now, and it's really, really kind of changed the course of my life, I have to say.
Yeah, I love that. And I can't wait to read that book now. And I couldn't agree more. I feel we're so disconnected from our mind and body that we constantly believe that someone outside of ourselves has the answer for how we feel. And while that may be true when you're seeing a doctor or a dentist or something of that professional nature, we don't really know how our body's been feeling for weeks or months until it crashes. And then we realize that we haven't paid enough attention to X or Y or Z, or a relationship in the same way has to end in order for us to realize that it had lost investment and energy or whatever it may be. And we're so far away from the self, or at least this version of the self, that, yeah, we're not really aware. I love what you just said about the idea of how conscious are we of the fact that we're breathing, we're here, we're present, we're together, versus how much are we living up here.
Yeah.
And it's really interesting, isn't it? Because there's almost two realities that we're always dealing. And if we're getting too heady, I'm happy to move away from it. But it's almost like I've been thinking a lot about how, in one sense, what's out here is real, and in one sense, what here isn't. And at the same time, actually, what's going on here is the real, because it defines how I interact with everything else. And it can help me be a better filter, a better chooser, selector of the people I'm around and the places I visit.
So you say you have to kind of use the mind to be able to become present. It's a process.
I would say I'm alluding to that in discovery, not in pushing it, if that makes sense.
Yeah, it makes sense to me. Yeah, I agree with that. Definitely.
Yeah. I've been reflecting a lot recently about how most of what's happening is in the invisible world, and
that's very interesting. Tell me more about that.
So I was thinking that in one sense you have reality externally, the visible world, but how I make sense of that visible world is all in the invisible space. And ultimately, how I make sense of it is the reality that I experience, regardless of what's happening around me, which is why we realize that people we all are telling ourselves stories and narratives all day long, but how we're processing what we're experiencing is our reality, as opposed to the event or what someone said or social media, as you gave an example. Like, I can either sit here and say, like, I know that when I wake up in the morning and I start scrolling on social media, my mind is now moving 10 times, 100 times faster than if I don't do that. And I know that brushing my teeth and showering is a much more peaceful process if I haven't looked at my phone than if I do.
Right.
And so that choice is being made in the invisible world. And the visible world is simply something I'm interacting with and taking from or being affected by.
Well, so we mostly live in amid things that are invisible.
Yes.
Right? Symbols, etc.
Yes.
Language is a symbol. It's not reality. And so things like government and social behavior, they're rules and codes that we abide by, but they're not visible. They're invisible,
yes.
Right? Yeah, definitely. And we're not aware of that.
And so we're trying to raise our awareness of the invisible world. I'm always trying to raise my awareness of, why do I process this way? Where does this come from? Where's this idea taking root?
It's a very interesting process to go through.
Yeah, it's hard. It's not clear. It's not like here's the step-by-step process. It's just something I've been engaging with a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I like to try and go through a thing where I question all of my beliefs and things of why Where does that come from? Why do I believe that? Why has that become something that's so hardened into my brain? I believe that about myself and who I am, about other people. I continually try to challenge it and look at what might be the source of it, and then maybe say, it could be the opposite, right? And it can lead to a lot of problems, because it's like my mind is always swimming and I'm never really think anything is certain. I'm always, saying the opposite side of it. But I think in the end, it's a very healthy process.
How do you, I love where we're going, because it kind of comes back to your same point, your earlier point about how someone of strong character knows how to take criticism, which means they know how to deal with the opposite of what they think or feel. And so this idea that you're sharing now, that it's healthy to be able to question, to evaluate, to assess our beliefs and values. But like you said, it's one of the hardest things to do, because you get into a space of uncertainty, you question your identity, you lose a sense of direction. How do we question ourselves without losing ourselves, and actually realize that that is the process of discovering and building ourselves?
Who really are you in the end? What constitutes you, the essence of you? What were you meant to accomplish in this world, right? Your sense of purpose, to use the title of your show. What is it that makes you an individual, makes you unique, that you alone are meant to accomplish in life? Well, it's not given. We don't know it. And a lot of people really, really struggle with trying to figure that out, right? Because they've been programmed by their parents, by their siblings, by the culture, by their teachers, to say, this is who you are, this is what you should believe in, this is what you were meant to accomplish in life, this is what's cool and what's not cool, okay? And so you have to question yourself. You have to say, is this really who I am? Am I really interested in this subject? Am I really interested in this kind of person, in getting in a relationship with this kind of person? And so question yourself on that level. You're getting at a deeper and deeper core of maybe who you are at essence. You're cutting away all of the social stuff that has been foisted upon you, that it has nothing to do with you, right? So in some ways, you're kind of a mystery to yourself, and you're sort of trying to solve that puzzle. And you have to ask these questions. Is this something I'm actually really interested in? Is this an intrinsically important thing to me? Or is it something that's in the culture, or something that other people have told me? And questioning that over and over and over again is not to lead you into this abyss where there's nothing real. It's to get you closer to who you are, to what really matters, to what that essence of you is, to what you were meant to accomplish in life. And once you reach that inner kind of gold, then you have a degree of certainty. Mm-hmm. So I knew from a very young age that I wanted to be a writer, right? I had a struggle to figure out what kind of writing I wanted. But knowing that that's who I am, probably about at the age of 8, it allowed me to go, I'm not interested in that. I don't want to do that. This isn't important. Why am I following this career path? Why am I wasting my time here? And then, so knowing that kind of core, you don't have to keep questioning yourself. So I'm never going to question myself. Why are you a writer? Why are you writing books? You should have been a pop star. You should have been a rock singer. You should have written poetry. You should have been a lawyer. No, I'll never go there, because I have that firm ground beneath me. And that's what your questioning is supposed to lead to. Get to the essence of who you are. And once you're there, you have a degree of certainty in your life.
Yeah, it does. It does. And I feel like a big challenge, something that I've been thinking a lot about lately, is a big challenge of where that comes from is because we care so much about what people think, and we're scared of being an unsuccessful version of ourselves because we'd rather be a successful version of what someone else wants us to be.
Yeah.
And so we're scared of being an unsuccessful writer if we could be a successful accountant. We're scared of being an unsuccessful artist because we'd rather be a successful tech person, whatever else it may be, fill in your blank. And because what we think people think of us has such a strong hold on us that we can't pivot to our passions, we can't maneuver to our purpose, we can't accept that maybe I'm not what this person wants me to be. And I've been spending a lot of time in this to try and figure out let's dive into it from different perspectives. But I guess, how much, Robert, do you care what people think of you, and how have you made sense of that over your time as someone who obviously writes that a lot of people enjoy your reading? People may disagree with you, they may agree with you. People, as you said, debate, discuss. But how have you made sense of that, and what's been your process of dealing with how you think people think about you?
There's how people think about me who know me personally, and there's how people think about me in the social realm who don't know me personally and who have an idea of who I am, which is often very different from the reality. But naturally, as a human being, I care that people understand that I'm a certain way, that I have a certain character, that I actually love jokes and silly bathroom humor, and that, I like stupid movies, and that I'm not always, reading heavy philosophy. My wife can tell you all about this childish side of my personality. So, it's always been important to me to feel kind of authentic and sincere. And I've always hated, and that's probably why I wrote the 48 Laws of Power. I hate people who are pretending to be something that they're not. Deeply, deeply wounds me, and I don't know why. I don't know why it's been like that since I was a child. Maybe I suspected that in my parents, the kind of falseness that upsets me deeply. And so I wrote the 48 Laws of Power because I felt people are such hypocrites. They pretend that they're not interested in power, but that's all they're interested in, right? They wear this front like, oh, I just want to help people. I just want to make movies and culture and art. No, you're interested in power. So it's always been deeply important to me to kind of reveal what's really going on in someone and to sort of feel that way about myself. So when I don't feel like I'm myself, when I feel like I'm faking it, and sometimes, to be honest with you, Jay, being a kind of quote unquote self-help guru, it feels false. It doesn't feel like who I am. I feel like a bit of an imposter. That's not really what I wanted to be.
Can relate to that.
I just wanted to write books. I love ideas. I love thoughts. I love expanding my consciousness, right? So the feeling that I'm not being who I am and that other people are kind of glomming onto that is upsetting to me.
Yeah.
I don't know if I'm answering your
question.
Oh,
no, that's resonating so deeply with me. I think it's so interesting, isn't it? How your self-perception is so different from people's projection onto you. And so I can identify with that. I do what I do because I'm just sharing what I love. So I love meditation. I love wisdom books. I love traditions. I love ancient wisdom and modern science and seeing the parallels between the two. And I just love talking about that and sharing that.
Yeah.
And I don't think I've ever thought of myself as a guru or a guide or that kind of individual. But we in society, if someone shares or teaches or gives insight or advice, we box them or bucket them as that. So same as you,
right.
We'd go in the same bucket, even though we kind of do similar things, but very different things. And we probably have some similar interests and some different interests. And it's interesting how there isn't a space. Like I often say to people, I'm just trying to be everyone's spiritual friend. Like that's my goal. Like I'm that guy who's introducing my friends to cool things that they may not have come across, whether it's Eastern spirituality or wisdom or whatever it may be. Like I'm that guy, and that's all I want to be. I don't want to be anything else.
Right.
But it's hard when you almost get put on a pedestal, even though you didn't ask for that or didn't want that.
Well, people's perception of you can almost become how you perceive yourself if you're not careful.
For sure.
You know? And so that's why I keep coming back to myself and going, is that really who I am?
Yes.
I don't think so, Robert. You know? And also, I actually, I'm a flawed individual. I'm a flawed human being. I have, blind spots in my nature. I have compulsions that I wish I didn't have. And I don't like this idea that people think I'm this powerful person who's figured everything out, because I'm not. That's why, I write the wrote the book, The Laws of Human Nature, it was because I understand that I shared the same flaws, that I have narcissistic tendencies, that I too can feel envy, that I have moments of grandiosity. So I'm not comfortable with the idea like that I'm this somebody that I'm not, that the perception of me is. But that's what happens to a lot of successful, famous people. They become trapped in what other people are thinking about them. They become trapped in that image. And I honestly think, I could be way off base, but I'm thinking of somebody like Anthony Bourdain, who committed suicide. I think he was burdened and weighed down so much by how people thought of himself, and it wasn't who he was. And it kind of made him feel deeply uncomfortable. Now, I'm sure there were many other issues going on, but a lot of times it can make you uncomfortable in your own skin, the way people perceive you, and it can lead to deep feelings of depression and a loss of who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, could write a new book called The Flaws of Human Nature. It's like,
thank you.
It's
well, that's what the book is.
Yeah,
really.
yeah.
It's the 18 dark corners of human nature. But yeah, that's a good idea.
Yeah, it's just, a thought of like, it is true. There's a seeking of perfection, and there's a sense that we've created in the world of before and after, in the sense that if you look at like a workout program, and there's nothing wrong with this because it makes sense, but there's a before picture and there's an after picture. And if someone's wealthy, it's like they were poor and now they're rich, and everything's a linear before and after journey. And what we're talking about, and I fully agree with you on this, is that actually all of my challenges are cyclical and they're different. So it's not that I never feel envy anymore. It's that I feel it differently to how I felt it 10 years ago. And hopefully I'm a bit better at dealing with it and understanding it and engaging with it than I was 10 years ago. But it's not that it doesn't affect me anymore.
Right.
And same with spiraling thoughts. It's not that I don't have anxious or negative thoughts anymore because I'm enlightened. I still have those thoughts. I just deal with them better than I did 10 years ago. And I probably have more tools to help me engage with them.
That's true. That's very
true. And I think that cyclical nature is a wonderful thing to accept as an individual and as someone who's learning, because you then don't fool yourself to think, oh, there will be one day where I will no longer have a negative or anxious thought like Jay and Robert. Like, they probably never have it. It's like, well, yeah, you probably have less, but it's not that I never have them.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so that kind of idea of this before and after, I think, is what confuses so many people, because it feels like, oh, there is a point at which I never have to go back to being this version of myself.
Well, that life isn't like that. It's weird sometimes because before the 48 Laws of Power came out, I was just this nobody living in a 1-bedroom apartment in Santa Monica, rent controlled, never really made any money, never really had any success in life. And I was constantly giving people advice, but nobody would listen to me because I hadn't written the book. And suddenly the book comes out and I'm supposed to be a different person. It's very strange, but I'm actually the same person that I was when I was living in that miserable 1-bedroom apartment, and giving out my advice that nobody listened to. Now people listen to it, but the only difference is because suddenly I have this credential, which is very strange.
Yeah, I can relate to that in so many ways. I used to be mentoring, coaching people in my community. I would do these little events in London 10, 11 years ago now, where like 5 people would show up and it was, I was just doing it. I would speak at universities for free for years. Like it's been such a big part of my life to just do this. I've always wanted to be someone who's learning and sharing. That's what I enjoy. I enjoy learning and I enjoy sharing. And I enjoy synthesizing and making things simple and practical for other people. That's what I get my joy from. And I was always inspired by 2 quotes. One is Ivan Pavlov, where he said, if you want a new idea, read an old book. And so that's always been something that my work has been inspired by. It's always based on ideas that seem timeless, but they're and old.
Very beautiful, yeah.
Yeah, and then there's another thought from Einstein, which is another part of what inspires my work, which is if you can't explain something simply, you don't understand it well enough. And so these were the 2 kind of tenets that what I enjoyed doing in the world. And again, I don't think they're magnificent, miraculous, or brilliant. They're just what I'm meant to do. And there's such a beautiful significance and insignificance in that very understanding. Like, it's really significant building because I'm like, I know what I have to do. And it's really insignificant because I'm like, it's just what I have to do. It's not the best or the worst, or it's not comparative.
Right.
And I think that's how, when you're talking in the daily laws of power, that's kind of how, in different words, how you describe like your life's, your life's gift, your life's work, your life's path.
I've always liked old books myself. So, I read a lot of books of philosophy, etc., history, but I also read books of famous Zen classics. The 20th century books, I'm not so sure, but I'd read like something from the 11th century where the thought process is so different, but it's timeless, it's human. Man, it is so beautiful. It so sparks these ideas that he, or this writer, this thinker, was dealing with the same things now, 1,000 years later, but they still strike a truth. But it's in this language that's very weird and primitive and barbaric. I don't know why that excites me so much. It's the same idea that a modern writer might write, but put in the words of somebody 1,000 years ago, it suddenly touches me.
Yeah.
Can you explain that, Jay?
I mean, I don't know if I can, apart from the fact that you've reincarnated and you had some connection to it, but, can I explain it? I can't explain it, but I can reflect on it. I mean, I find that there's a part of it that writer or creator may never have known if anyone would ever read it.
Yeah.
And so that privacy and that secrecy and that intimacy with their work, not knowing that it would ever be viewed, seen, read, broadcasted, that has some power to it.
Yeah. There's a humility to that. Whereas now people write, we're expecting all these people to be reading it. We do it for the attention.
Yeah.
It was much different back then. Yeah, that's very interesting. I never thought of that.
Yeah, I've definitely found that I try and sit with ideas for longer now and try and I'd love to know your process for that. How have you managed that since that moment of where you became quote unquote successful externally because of 48 Laws? How did that change your creative process? How did you hold on to the roots of this kind of thinking?
So after the 48 Laws of Power came out and it was successful, I was at a turning point in my life. And it's a turning point that a lot of people I think have faced was, do I just continue redoing the 48 Laws of Power? It was successful. It worked well. Why don't I just write the 48 Laws of Power Part 2? It'll bring in money. It'll bring in attention. I'll just riff off what I wrote there. And something about me was not comfortable with that. It seemed cheap. It seemed easy, and it seemed lazy. And I know myself that if I'm not challenged by something different, I grow bored. So I have to write something that feels like there's energy behind it. There's anger. There's love. There's something powerful behind it. I have to feel it or it won't be in the words. So if I'm just doing the 48 Laws of Power Part 2, it won't be there. It'll have an emptiness. And damn it, a lot of artists and writers fall into that trap. And it's why their books kind of have this sort of hollow ring to them, right? They're just going through the motions, just repeating what worked before. And I can't stand that feeling. I have to feel like I'm off into a new land with this new book. So each book has to represent a challenge, right? And so the one I'm writing now is completely different from all 7 of the other books. And it's an incredible challenge, but it makes me excited about every day because I know I cannot repeat the same kind of books over and over and over again. My soul becomes dead and I have to feel alive with each project. Am I answering I keep feeling like I'm not answering
You're totally answering my question. I'm loving these personal answers. No, I can resonate very deeply with that as well. I always try and write about something that I'm working through or struggling with, whether it's personal, whether it's with clients, whether it's with someone in my life, friends, family. Like, it feels alive. It needs to feel alive.
Yeah.
I can't write from a point of theory or knowing.
Yeah.
Like, the book has to be a discovery.
Exactly.
And I've only just started my journey. I've only written 2 books, but as I'm hearing you, I'm happy that I feel that I'm thinking about it in a healthy way.
Yeah.
Because I was about to write my 3rd book, and the topic everyone wanted was so predictable and expected, and it made sense. And I was like, I don't want to write about something that makes sense. Like that's boring. Like it's
Right.
like, I want to write about something that feels like alive in my life and electric and makes me, I'm like, now that I've chosen, and I will tell this to you later, but I've chosen my next topic and I've just been like writing notes about it. I'm reading about it. I'm seeing connections everywhere.
Well, that means it's going to be a great book.
Yeah, it feels, I mean, it's harder. It's harder because you don't know. So you're spending more time, like we said earlier, you're spending more time with emptiness because there's a sense of, well, I don't know which direction this book's going to go in.
Yeah.
So it's that comfortable with discomfort and uncertainty.
Yeah.
But there's a joy in that.
Yeah, very much so.
Yeah. When you're discovering your process through a book or work, how have you learned to become comfortable in the discomfort of creativity, in that, like, you don't know where the path's going to take you. You don't know if it's going to land or not. You don't know if it, like, how are you grappling with that process of what we're discussing?
Well, it's very strange because I'm dealing with it right this very moment. I'm writing something that's driving me crazy. And it's this, and the very subject I'm writing about is about what I'm going through. So I'm writing it. This is in my book on the sublime, and I'm writing about the concept of the daemon. Are you familiar with that?
Mm-mm.
It's the idea, it's an ancient Greek idea, but it's in many other cultures, that we have a second self, that there's a voice inside of us that is guiding us to something higher or better, but it can also lead us to something lower and worse. It can be demonic, which is where the word comes from, or it could be something. And Socrates had his daemon. There was a voice inside of him, and it always just said, this is the right way to go, or this is the wrong way to go. Nothing more than that, right? And so when I'm writing, it doesn't feel right. It's driving me crazy. And I'm going through this right now. It doesn't feel right. It doesn't resonate. It's not truth. It's not real. You got to start over. You got to do it again. And in the back of my mind, I'm thinking, God, I've lost it. I'm getting old and I just don't have my mojo anymore. But then I realized I've gone through this like 85 times. Every single book, it'll come to you, it'll come back. It isn't right because it doesn't feel right. It doesn't resonate. It doesn't have a reality to it. So I have to go through this process where I write something and it excites me and it interests me and it just flows out of me, as opposed to like I have to pull every word out. And so I learned to trust myself that eventually I'll figure it out. But each time I hit that wall, I go, this is it, Robert. You're finished. The book isn't going to come out. You're done. The wells are dry, you know?
Yeah. So. That's so interesting. I feel like that is every creative's journey. Like it has to go through that. The wells are dry, as you just said, that kind of experience of, that's it. It's over. There's nothing else coming out now. And it's almost like as we know, like the cliche of like, it's on the other side of that feeling.
Yeah.
But it's true. There is a sense of, when everything is just not making sense. How have you learned to sense whether something feels true to you? Because it obviously felt true to someone. How do you decipher between, oh, this feels true, it feels real to me, even if people don't agree with it?
Because it just feels that way.
It's purely just a feeling.
First of all, it like, I'm always trying to get at what's real and not at what's theoretical. I have a real dislike of abstraction for its own sake. Right? It feels like it's a way of eluding something. It's an evasion. I want to get at the core and the reality of what I'm trying to write about. And so when I get it, I feel it, and I know that I've done that. And I have the reader in my mind, and I know the reader can connect to it. It's going to have a personal appeal. Whereas I have a tendency to be abstract and professorial and theoretical. I cross all of that out. If you saw my notebooks, 95% of it's crossed out, and I don't let the public ever see that side of me because I don't like it. I want my books to feel like I'm hitting something that's actually truthful and real that people don't like to talk about, kind of thing, you know? So right now I'm writing about what is our self? What is the sense of self that we have in our world? It's a very limited idea of the self. We have a very limited idea of our consciousness. We have a very limited idea of what it means to be a human being in the 21st century. We're actually much more immense and much more interesting than we think we are. We have these possibilities, these connections, because we're a part of something incredibly vast. And to have consciousness is absolutely an astounding thing, right? So I want to sort of expand what you, the reader, thinks of who you are, what yourself is. It's much larger than you imagine. But I have to convey that in language that feels right to me, that feels authentic, that feels like everybody in Africa, in China, in India, in Idaho is going to be able to relate to it, you know?
Yeah, no, for sure. And I think that's what I was alluding to with that invisible world point of like how that's what we don't see. Like there's so much to ourselves that we don't see, that we're fully unaware of, that we don't realize we have access to.
Right.
And yeah, finding the right terminology, I find to be such there's one word that I love, which is a bit more ethereal, but I guess an astronomer could find some beauty in it. But there's a term in the Vedic literatures called Antarakash, which means inner sky.
Say it again.
Antarakash. Antar means inner, and Akash means sky.
Inner sky?
Yeah, inner sky.
Beautiful.
And it's this idea of how, we're so fascinated by outer space, but there's that same inner sky that exists. So just that, like the galaxy and the planetary systems and everything else that exists internally too.
Oh, I have to.
But there has to be just as we have to go and do space exploration, you could do the same internally.
Oh, for sure.
And you discover so much.
That's exactly what I'm writing about. That's very interesting.
Yeah. And it's fascinating. And so, I find language as well. I find vocabulary so needed. And I feel like I grew up with a smart vocabulary, but not the biggest. And I feel reading, of course, expands that. And especially when you read history and other books. And I found that language is just so powerful. And I worry that social media exposes us to such limited language that the brain and the mind and the consciousness doesn't have the opportunity to be expansive because the words don't allow for it. If we're all reading the same memes and the same trends and the same hashtags, and it kind of just creates this very, very limited space of consciousness.
Well, that's why I like looking at other languages. I speak several other languages and I'm constantly learning them. And right now I'm reading a lot about an African culture called the Akan in West Africa, in Ghana. And their concepts of the soul, the spirit, and the body. And they have a word in there called Sun Sum. And we translate it to spirit, but then I'm reading the African philosophers who actually know that word, and they go, it's not the same as the word spirit. And then they go on and describe it. And that one word contains all of these other worlds that are so weird and interesting that the word spirit in English does not convey, right? And other languages have that sense. And so language can have that possibility where it opens up. It's not just this one track meaning. It has other valences, other possibilities to it, right? And so, we're kind of deadening our language in a way. And, if you study like other cultures, Eskimos had like 1,000 words for snow, and we have one word. Russians have like 40 words for the color blue, and we have one word, kind of thing. As the language gets smaller and smaller and more uniform, our thoughts become more and more limited and uniform. So to hear a word like inner sky, it opens up all these other ideas in your mind. Whereas we don't have a word like that in English, And then because I'm doing things with Zen, Japanese language is so rich with things that we can't possibly even begin to express in English, So,
What have been other ways of people opening up their minds? This has been one of my favorite things to do. I remember reading a quote from Robin Sharma years ago that said, ordinary people have big TVs, extraordinary people have big libraries. And it was one of those, little dreams I had. I was like, one day I have a home, I'm going to have a big library. And that was one of my most favorite things to kind of put together when I moved here. And, I started spending more time when I would travel, I've always collected books. And I started also collecting expanding my audio library, I realized as I grew, when I was growing up, we listened to a very limited form of music in my home. And even as I was growing up as a teenager, I listened to like one genre of music.
What was that?
Rap and hip hop. Like that was, and again, I love rap and hip hop. I love rap and hip hop history. It's super cool. I have no issues with it. I just think that my audio library was so limited in my teens that now that I'm in my 30s, I'm now listening, I'm trying to listen to so many random different things, which again inspire different thoughts, different feelings, different emotions. And so I've realized that vocabulary was one thing. Audio has been another thing. What are other things that you've discovered that help open up that consciousness in mind? Because as we both keep referring to, social media technology is almost making us more limited, more singular, more one-dimensional.
Well, as I said, it's something I'm writing about right now. So music and the audible stuff is very, very interesting and very exciting. So there's this new phenomenon where musicologists have been able to recreate music from eras that we never could listen to before. So I was writing at one point about a festival in ancient Greece, and to put me in the mood, I wanted to hear ancient Greek music. Well, that doesn't exist. I mean, there are no recordings of it, but sure enough, there are. And the rhythms and the sound is so weird and alien that it makes it, music captures the spirit of a time, right? So if we're only hearing these same melodies, you hear cars going by with that same kind of pop song. It's such a limited circle of harmony, such a limited circle of what music can be. But when you open up to African music, to music from ancient Babylonia, to Greece, to music in South America, other rhythms, other poetry in music and sounds, it's mind-blowing. It's interesting. So that's what I'm saying, that the human animal is much more interesting than we think it is. Reading about ancient cultures is a very mind-expansive project you can go on.
Are there any books you'd recommend in that regard?
You know what's so exciting now is they have these books called The Daily Life in Ancient Babylonia, The Daily Life in, I forget which city in India, The Daily Life in Ancient Greece, etc. And you get a feel for not just the grand philosophical issues, but how people ate, what their houses were like. And so I was I just wrote a chapter about our relationship to time and history. And I was trying to take the reader in my new book, I'm giving them exercises. And I'm saying, try to imagine yourself in a world 1,000 years ago, and you walk out your front door. There's no mechanical sounds. There's no airplanes. There's no cars. There's no machines. It's just birds. Maybe a saw and a hammer is the most you're going to hear. That's a strange thing. There are no signs. There are no advertisements. There's no words everywhere. It's kind of empty, right? You're just wandering around. There are all these kind of rancid, weird, horrible smells because people aren't bathing. But they're very human smells, right? Your whole sensory experience is on another level. But when you live in this 21st century world where things are so sanitized, where we don't smell these things, we only hear these packaged mechanical sounds, your sensory world is shrinking down and down and down. And you realize, yeah, ancient world, they had some bad stuff. They weren't very good. You know, they had slavery. I understand all of the negatives, so I'm not painting this portrait. But on another level, their realm of senses, their realm of language, their internal worlds were far richer than ours. And by connecting to that, by reading these books, by reading books, not just the daily life thing I said, but actually text from those times. As I was mentioning, when I read a monk, a Zen monk from the 11th century, and the different thought processes, it opens my mind to a different way of thinking, to a different way of accessing reality. But like, I'm reading a lot about Aztecs because I'm sort of obsessed with the Aztecs. I don't know why. And they had these amazing spectacles. That was the thing about the ancient world, these festivals and spectacles that are far beyond Burning Man or any rock concert, right? You know, I could describe the fire ceremony in Aztec culture that only occurred every 70 years. There is nothing you can ever imagine in your life that would be like that. It is so utterly spectacular. And so I had this
800-page book called Aztec Philosophy. And it's very theoretical, but God, it gives you an entree into a totally different way of thinking about the world, right? Where they have these metaphors that the universe has this energy. Some of the energy is like string that's being wound around in a certain way. It's like weaving, like other things like that. This kind of energy that the world has. Wow, this is fascinating. You know, our ancestors were actually thinking, but they're not they're us. It's a human being. We're all human. We all have those same kind of consciousness.
Yeah. You know, I love also finding things in cultures that match, but are in different languages. And so,
like what?
So I went to Hawaii a few years ago, which obviously for someone who grew up in London, it's not normal. People in America or LA travel to Hawaii fairly often. I went to Hawaii and, well, not often, it's more accessible, but I went recently and my wife and I went on one of the tours there, and they showed us the petroglyphs, which are there obviously like markings and storytelling technique and tool. And they were showing us how when a child is born, they used to place the umbilical cord on the ground and they would then draw a spiral around it. And that would be seen as a place that the child could always come back to feel the energy and reconnect with the earth.
How exciting.
And I was thinking, that's spectacular. I wish everyone felt disconnected to the earth. And then we would go out every morning on a canoe. I forget their name for it, but they had their version for it. And they would pay respects to the sun and the ocean. And we would take part in this ceremony with them. And in India, there's something known as Surya Namaskar, which it translates to sun salutation.
Sure.
Which, again, I've talked to Andrew Huberman about this. It's like kicking off the circadian rhythm, but the goal is you pay your respects to the sun for everything it offers to you and the energy that it provides. And so to see that in Hawaiian culture, Indian culture, and then I was in Bhutan recently. I went on a trip to Bhutan, which I'd always wanted to visit. And this is a culture that really feels like you're going back in time. Like you walk out there and it feels like what you just described 1,000 years ago.
Where is Bhutan?
Bhutan is landlocked between India and China.
India and China.
So right in between. It's
where they're having their tensions, the kind of wars that's going on a little bit. Or
Bhutan doesn't have a war. No, they don't even have a military. It's not part of their culture.
Wow.
They believe in, they're a Buddhist nation.
Is it a Buddhist nation?
Yes, yes.
Oh.
And their practices are very protected. Their culture is very protected. Like everyone's generally still wears the cultural dress.
How exciting.
It was spectacular. There may be a couple of these now, but until very recently, there's no malls, no cinemas, no restaurants, like completely.
Yeah.
And it's beautiful because it's just hills and mountains. They believe that the forests will always be 70% of the landmass because they believe they're sacred. You can't trek up to or ski on any of their mountains because they're sacred. They protect them. So there's I almost felt like what you just said. There's no